Howdy y'all, I am Ice Gold, and there's a lot of broken spells in PvP, and I'm going to go over what I believe to be the top 10 of those, as well as some honorable mentions that I'll just run through real quick before I start the list. So, in PvP, spells that, most PvE players would never have even thought about using are suddenly very, very good, especially the Path B spellments. And it's let me just look back at my Google Doc here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, half the list is Arc 1 Path B spellments, and you could even argue that there's a sixth. So that's fun. we love broken spells in this game, and how many of them have been sort of running the show in PvP for at least the last little while. They have actually been, the developers have actually been kind of cracking down on some of them. Some have gotten nerfed. I know Regenerate and Pigsy would have definitely made the top 5 if this was a month or so ago, but not anymore because the developers finally took action. So let's go over the honorable mentions. So I've made a list of 10 honorable mentions that could in some order make up number 11 through 20, but this is about the top 10, so I'm not going to dwell on it for too long. Troll for its 50% detonate, Grim Reader for its damage and utility, Hero Chrysalis for its damage, Stone Colossus, but not Elephant, because, again, damage, Baba Yaga, or Witch's House Call, for its damage, Centaur for its 40 blades, Sabretooth for its damage, and also its utility to a degree, not to mention, not every school has a 10 pip TC hit, Earthquake for its utility, Empower for its utility, it should be 5% of your max health for every school no matter what, and Basilisk for its damage and utility. There's probably more that could make it onto this list, and I know I'm forgetting about at least like 5 spells, but those are just the ones that I could think of at 6:14 a.m. this morning. So let's actually move into the top 10 now. Coming in 10th place, we have Wraith, and yeah, this spell is number 10. That's just how many fundamentally broken cards are in this game, and I have seen Fires take double buffed S'more Machines, which, just so we're clear, costs 2 shads and 5 pips, and it will just get outvalued by 1 double buff Wraith. And the school best equipped to take on Death's egregiously high resist is still losing trades to a non-shad spell. Like, let that one sink in, team. The main thing with this is that, despite its low-ish base damage, the drain mechanic just outtrades buffed hits. And if you do 4,300 with a Shad, for example, and they do 3,000 with a Wraith, the 1,500 health that they drain and get back adds up to 4,500 value, which beats out your Shad by 200. And this could really just be a stand-in for any death drain, but Wraith is a particularly bad offender because it's relatively cheap and does a lot of damage. I would nerf this card and drains in general by reducing the amount the cards drain from 50% down to 25%. That would at least get it under control a little bit. It wouldn't be outvaluing shads, and that's a good place to start. In 9th place, we have Gearhead Destroyer, and every Ice, Life, and Death hates the spell. This is the spell that makes Ice versus Balance a logout condition for the Ice. It was already pretty mental that Shift exists, but giving it to Balance as well as making it take off a shield is just another display of the developers not taking certain matchups into consideration. Balance is also now extremely heavily favored to win against Life, because most of Life's heals are unprotected overtimes now, and Balance can just steal those. And, a spell like Hunting Worm is completely unviable against a Balance because of this. And, I mean, not that it was great before, but any unprotected overtimes of either kind are not safe to use when a Balance can just use 4 pips to either steal your heal or shift your dot or both at the same time. I honestly think this mechanic was a mistake, and I would take it out of the game entirely. You know, maybe I'd give this path B a different conditional, like maybe do an extra damage if the target has more pips or something, but this mechanic literally cannot stay because there are now 2 matchups involving balance that are logout conditions for the other school as a result of this spell existing. It's only not higher because protected overtimes exist. Coming in 8th place, we have all triple effect spells costing less than 3 pips. I'm talking about spells like, you know, Elemental Trap, spells like Threefold Fever, spells like, you know, Fuel. Although, you know, Fuel, I guess, isn't as bad of an offender as, you know, the 1-pip LE traps and 3-folds and all that, but this one is self-explanatory, and it really just applies to all of them. These setup cards are all better than the counters because you have to spend so many more pips getting rid of them compared to how few someone has to spend to put them on you. I would honestly nerf these by making PvP only versions that cost a minimum of 3 pips, because all the stacking you see going on is a real issue, and main deck copy limits are not going to fix that. Coming in 7th, we have Brace, and as a nice main, I do indeed love my braces, but there is an inherent flaw in how the spell works. Resist has gotten so high on most schools, and Brace being in the game just exacerbates that problem, and yeah, it's tough. It effectively eats 20% of your pierce, which leaves you with much less to pierce into your target's resist, dramatically decreasing the damage. And some schools really benefit from this a lot more than others. You know, Balance, obviously, Death, and really just schools that can just sit there and turtle. It's like if they put up a brace, you are not hitting for the next 4 rounds. So it's like hitting into a brace on a Death is like hitting into 95 resist. You are not doing damage like that. And I would nerf this by making the braces 20% damage reduction apply after Pierce is calculated, as opposed to being a Pierce sponge, which is how everyone uses it right now. Going in 6th, we have Supernova, and this spell has been nerfed a good few times, but it's still just an insane thing to think about. Popping your opponent's aura and doing north of 1,000 damage on an open hit is just so insane to me. The accuracy stopped being a problem when the TCs were made to be 75% instead of the usual 60, and the damage is still an issue after the nerf. I genuinely don't even think I would nerf this spell. I would go full Ratbeard mode and blanket ban it. Provided, of course, my brace idea also goes through, because, you know, Balance having this spell in their arsenal makes it so their opponents can't aura, but they can, and when you consider how busted Brace is, it's like, it's a bit of a problem, because Balance will just have like a permanent 20% more resist than they already have. So it's like Storm versus Balance, there's like a 40, I think, resist diff, which is insane. So yeah, hopefully they just chalk that spell entirely. Like, it needs to go. It has needed to go ever since Avalon came out in 2012, so yeah, you hate to see that. The developers back in 2012, like, they threw caution to the wind when they designed balanced Avalon spells, as evidenced by this next entry on the list. Coming in 5th, we have Mana Burn, and this spell has always been insanely broken, and the damage used to be much higher, and it would even drain up to 6 pips, but in this Gambit-centered meta we have found ourselves in since the summer, this spell has come roaring back as one of the most fundamentally broken spells ever added to the game. If a Balance is ever in a pinch and they need an extra turn, or maybe they need to stop their opponent from using a Shad, they can just fall back on this spell and stall out their opponent. I don't actually take issue with the damage here. Balance's main identity since the Rochambeau Wheel became the norm has been centered around pips, and, you know, there's spells like Now's Knockout, the Balance Scion, which is meant to punish a player for getting too many pips. And my issue with the stalling mechanic that effectively allows a Balance to never have to worry about getting hit with a Gambit, it's like if you can't set something up against a Balance, you're not killing them. And it's like, the way you beat Balance, it's supposed to be like chip damage, I guess, but with how high health and res have gotten, especially for Balance, not to mention the whole Brace and Supernova type thing going on, it's just, setting up a Gambit is really your only chance to really pack a lot of damage in one hit, and the fact that we just don't have that is honestly a problem, in my honest opinion. I think I would finally put the controversy surrounding this spell to rest by buffing the damage from 50 to 65 per pip burned, and removing the pip drain mechanic entirely, which would make it more of a damage spell that you always need to be wary of when facing a Balance, as opposed to a crutch that they lean on to stop you from being able to play the game. Coming in 4th place, we have Kraken, and the Fire School, this one right here, We recently got a passive buff with the removal of flat resist, which allows us to use our overtime spells much more efficiently. And when this happens, though, everyone and their dog started carrying more Krakens than they did before, which any school can use if they have enough storm accuracy and are able to get 2 storm pips. It clears a protected overtime, like, you know, Inferno Salamander, which I can show you here, which does a lot of damage and is a protected overtime, but it gets just countered by 1 Kraken. That's all it takes. Kraken, you know, it clears a protected overtime, and it puts on 2 chromatic 25% blades, which is an insane tempo gain and renders a lot of fire spells, among plenty of others, completely useless. And I don't think I need to explain why removing a protected overtime for only 4 pips is insanely broken, much less the chromatic blades that you get from it. And honestly, I would nerf this by swapping its utility with Stormzilla, so the main protected overtime counter would be 5 pips instead of 4, and I would have the chromatic blades become storm-specific blades, so that the Storm School can make better use of their main identity spell. Doing this would also turn any non-storms who use this into sitting ducks for the next spell on the list, which you might have guessed is Banshee. Yes, the spell that completely invalidates blading in any capacity. If your target uses at least 2 blades with a spell, 1 Banshee is all it takes to set up a Curse Gambit. It can slow down anyone going for blade strategies by a ton, and it's widely considered to be one of the most broken spells of the game due to how little it costs and how much it does. Almost every school carries this, and it's almost never a bad move to do this if your opponent has a blade. And I would nerf this by taking the weakness aspect out of it, and then just leaving it with the infections, and maybe even buff the infections, because currently they're just 25s, but you know, you could buff those to 40% reasonably, and it would just be like, it would take off blades, which Death is supposed to do, and it would nerf heals, which Death is also supposed to do. So, in its current state, Banshee pretty much does all 3 things that Death usually does, which I think is a little, like, strong. It's like it's blade removal, which is death countering storm, applying infects, which is death countering life, and applying weaknesses, which is Death's main identity. So just being able to do all of that in 1 round is, like, it just makes the spell so insanely strong, and it really does need a nerf. I think at least taking out the weaknesses would be good, because in its current state, you know, like I said before, you set up a Gambit in 1 turn, so, you know, take that as you will. In second place, we have Hydra, and most of what makes this exceedingly broken is in the fact that the Echo mechanic happens before the hit as opposed to after. There is no counterplay to this spell, and the last time we had a spell with no counterplay was when Loremaster terrorized the Legendary bracket leading up to the Fall 2019 update. I'm talking like, you had to go first and ward the balance if you were a Legendary of any school, and yeah, I mean, even then they could still kill you, so that was rough back in the day. So in essence, Hydra will echo up to 3 shields on its target, which creates minus 35% shields on the caster, which is not something you want to be hitting into. And then it will hit, and if you had an elemental shield on to, you know, block out the damage, you are now down 3 shields, and the balance is now up 3 shields. So you reduce the damage by a pretty good bit, but the balance now has 3 shields that you need to somehow deal with before you can advance the match at all. Some schools, like Fire, honestly, handle that much better than others. Fire has a spell like Elephant, which will clear 3 shields before the hit. We also have Fire Elf, which will apply a 2nd overtime on top of clearing a shield. So Fire is well equipped to deal with Hydra, but most other schools are not, and that's a problem. It's like I was saying, you know, Fire Elf is really helpful for this, but just having to Elf at all is a massive design flaw that needs to be corrected ASAP. Not to mention, you can't Tower Shield a Hydra either, because the Ice and Storm heads just do mass, along with giving the balance the 135 shield that they get from echoing your tower. I would nerf this spell by reducing the damage by maybe 15-ish per head and making it echo after the hit instead of before. Because Hydra, you know, it already does more damage than it needs to be doing. It's based on elemental DPP, which is averaged between Fire, which is high, Storms, which is the highest in the game, and then Ice, which is the lowest in the game. So it's like you have number 1, number 2, and number 7. So it's like that averages out to higher than Balance's usual DPP. And then it's like you throw in the echo mechanic, and it's such a broken spell. I hope that the developers nerf it at some point. And of course, coming in first place, y'all have probably thought it's been missing for a while, but first place is Vampire, and without question, a spell that puts up to 2 60% weaknesses. Chromatic, by the way, is insanely broken by any and all means. Couple that with the fact that it's beyond easy to set up the conditional with a threefold or a Banshee, both of which appear on this list too, and it's even worse for the health of the meta. And it doesn't even end there. It also drains, leading to your average Death Wizard getting around 1500 damage and healing value on an open hit, while also putting up that utility. Myth is the only school that reasonably stands a chance against this. The loss of tempo is far too great if you're comboing, and it's like if you get hit with one of these, it just stonewalls you, you know? So it's like, this is far and away the most overpowered spell in PvP. I would nerf this spell by tuning down the 60 weaknesses to 30s, which would still be a sizable amount of damage reduction without being a stonewall spell. But yeah, thank y'all for watching. I've been Ice Gold. This is, yeah, there's a lot of spells in this game that need to be nerfed, especially from a PvPer's POV. There's just, I'm hopeful that when they drop the Arc 2 spellaments, there will be like an audit for the Arc 1 spellaments because they really need it. And yeah, man, we'll just have to see how it goes. But yeah, thank y'all for watching. I've been Ice Gold. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave like 50 comments for the algorithm. My Discord is in the description if you want to come chat with me some more. And I will see y'all later.